Welcome to Chess News 17. Today I want to take a look at a game Ian Nepomniachtchi against Luc van Wely from the 4th round of the Dortmund chess tournament. So this was the only decisive game that was played yesterday, and Nepomniachtchi opened with e4. Van Wely plays his favorite Sicilian, and they follow the line of the Najdorf theory for quite some time here. Van Wely is a big expert on the Najdorf, and here we see the all famous English attack appearing. And after bishop e6, queen d2 was played. Now, there used to be a time when I was a bit puzzled about this move, because normally white plays f2, f3 in these positions, you know, to protect the pawn here, but also to keep the knight out of g4. So you may wonder, why does black's knight not jump to g4 now? You know, just along the lines of the Sicilian dragon also, where it usually is a very disturbing move for white. Well, in this case knight g4 would be a bit early, because white could answer bishop g5, and then if f6, for instance, this knight here on g4 is a bit sidetracked. But after bishop e7, then white can exchange on e7, and black has troubles with his d-pawn, because it has lost the natural defender, the bishop on e7. So after queen d2, knight g4 is a bit premature, and Van Wely played knight b d7. And now castles. And again now knight g4 would be a bit early, for the same reasons. Bishop g5, attacking the queen. And now, black has nothing better really than just to bring back the knight to f6 like this. But then white can try and take the initiative with f4. Now let's see, and he can now try and threaten the bishop on e6. So if black prevents that in playing e takes f5, then white has a nice advantage after this line, for instance. Or if black tries not e takes f4 but h6, then f5 is good also. Then there are changes like this. After queen takes g5, I suppose white is also better. Okay, so after castles, first bishop e7, and now knight g4 is a threat, because bishop g5 is no longer possible then. Okay, and now white has a choice. He can either play with f2, f3 and the English attack, you know, with g2, g4, or he can play f2, f4 and go for some control of the white squares here. Of course this threatens f4, f5, which would attack the bishop on e6, and if the bishop were to exchange itself for the knight on b3, that would be a very good exchange for white, because look at the knight on b5, it really hasn't got any useful squares, and it is usually white's worst placed piece in this line. So f4, f5 would then be a positional threat. Okay, but now Van Wely plays knight g4, and he's pressuring now all white's black squares. And in combination with the battery on d8 and e7, and possibly bringing the bishop to g5, white has to be careful for some threats. Of course, so this explains why now he bolsters up his black squares with g2, g3 like that. But now black takes the bishop pair, knight e3, and queen takes e3. Okay. Now Van Wely plays b5. These are all very well known theory moves. And if we look at the green and the red squares, we can see that there is some kind of strategic battle going on. White is stronger on the white squares, which are highlighted in green, and black is stronger on the black squares, which are highlighted in red. So it makes sense that black with b7, b5 takes away a few of these white squares here for white, so that it is difficult for white to bring his bishop to c4, for instance. Okay. Now notice that f4, f5 is not a threat at this moment. White would like to play that move, but of course in this case it would be a blunder after bishop g5, and white would lose the queen. So Nepomniachtchi prepares that. After b5 he first plays king b1, removing that danger. Okay, Smeets in a London tournament 2007 had played h4 here, also preparing to play f4, f5, but Nepomniachtchi opts for king b1 here. Okay, and now Van Wely knows himself out in these positions very well. In Hoogeveen 2007 he played knight f6 here against Ponomarev and managed to win that game. But for this game he came up with something new. Well, maybe it was played before, but at least he didn't play knight f6. After king b1 he played queen b6. And I like this move because it offers the exchange of queens. And if white were to go along with black, then black's knight could come to b6 and jump into c4 possibly, but it would also vacate the d7 square for black's bishop, which is sitting here on e6. And that would mean that f4, f5 is not really a threat, and black would maintain the bishop pair. And in these kinds of positions, I suppose the position could quite easily turn around for white, you know. Yeah, black would have a nice endgame in that case. So that explains why after queen b6, Nepomniachtchi does not exchange the queens, but moves it out of the way, queen e2. And now Van Wely plays b5, b4, kicking the knight like this. And maybe black can look for some alternatives here, because he is giving up some white squares, and considering the way Nepomniachtchi is playing, it looks like white can maintain an advantage after this move. So if we look for some alternatives, I don't suppose it's bishop c4, because then after queen f3 white simply threatens to exchange the bishop, which is the most important defender of the square here on d5, and then he would also threaten to jump into d5 with the knight and take control of the position. So in order to escape the exchange, black would have to retreat the bishop, but then after f5 would have to give up his bishop anyway. And then in such a position, I suppose that white has the easier game, because he can just simply push his pawns on the king side, and black's pawns on the queen side cannot be pushed that easily, because if the a pawn moves, then the b5 pawn will fall, and if the b pawn moves, then both a4 and c4 will become available for white's pieces. So I suppose that in this position white would also have advantage. So not bishop c4, but then maybe after queen e2, just simply castles would be a good idea, you know. Just to wait with b5, b4 and see what white's plan is. Well, I will leave this up to the big guys gladly to figure out if this is a useful alternative. Okay, let's go back to the game where Van Wely played b5, b4. Now you would think that the normal move here is knight d5. And then after bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and then bishop f6, bishop h3, white would probably enjoy a small edge. But Nepomniachtchi did not play like this. He played, very interestingly, some kind of pawn sacrifice, or at least it turns out to be a pawn sacrifice. After b4 he plays knight a4. And of course he is putting his knight on the edge, but also attacking the queen. And it seems that he has a very special idea in mind. Maybe he had prepared this or thought of it behind the board. Because now after queen c6, which attacks the knight on a4, and notice that the knight has no escape squares, white now plays f4, f5. And of course he's thinking that if the bishop now takes on b3, then I will recapture on b3, and automatically my knight will be protected on a4, and we have similar strategic thoughts as to the line before, where white can easily push his kingside pawns and black's queenside pawns are really blocked. And this knight on a4 is just more or less keeping Black's army at bay on the queen side, and also the squares on c4 and d5 have become more available for White, so I suppose that in this position White would also enjoy a nice strategic advantage. But after f4, f5, Black says to himself, listen, I'm not going to exchange, of course, on b3, because then we would have this position with the protected knight on a4. And since I can recapture the knight on a4 later, I will play a desperado. I will just sell the life of my bishop dearly for this pawn. So Van Wely played bishop takes f5. Now this is of course ABC, you know, for these grandmasters. Hello email, go away email. But Nepomniachtchi looked a little bit further than this, because it is just one pawn. And after e takes f5 and queen takes a4, he really gets some nice positional compensation for his pawn. Because look at Black's queen. It is actually quite badly placed. The only square available is b5, but if it were to appear there, White would immediately regain the pawn, and maybe even play discovery with his queen or something. And furthermore, all of White's pieces are developed, Black's king is still in the center, and White's bishop is much more active than Black's bishop. And now he plays, of course, bishop g2, and he has beautiful diagonal for his bishop, and also plans to move around his knight. Now let's go back one move, because there's one other thing I would like to show you. After e takes f5, of course this rook on h1 is hanging, but it would not be a very good idea to take this rook for Black, because after queen takes h1, there would be a chasing of the queen here, bishop g2, and after queen takes h2, rook h1, queen g3, and bishop takes a8, White would be a pawn up, a piece up. Of course, Black has some pawns for that, a number of pawns, but I suppose that he would succumb to the pressure of all the combined White forces in this case. So yeah, this would not really be a very good idea for Black to play, because where is his king going to be? If he castles kingside, then it is difficult for him to move his extra pawns, which are on the king side, you know. So yeah, I think he will have problems here. Also the a6 pawn is weak, and all these pieces will just enter Black's position here. So let's go back to the game, where after queen takes a4, bishop g2 was played, attacking the rook on a8. Now, I'm not sure what Van Wely was thinking at this moment. He can move his attacked rook, of course, and let's have a look at some alternatives. Rook c8 he could have played, but then rook d5 would be an interesting move, just going for the queen here on a5. And then knight f6 would vacate the d7 square for the queen, and after rook a5, queen d7, g4 castles, White can win back his pawn on a6 like this, but also the rook is a bit weird out there on a6, you know, and it doesn't really aid in any kingside attack, and maybe Black is actually quite glad that he got rid of the pawn on the a file, because it will also give him maybe some attacking chances on the a file, or something similar like this could follow, and I think we would have a very unclear position. Also after bishop g2 it would be possible to play rook b8 for instance, then also rook d5, knight f6, rook a5, queen d7, rook a6, queen f5 looks like a better option than Van Wely played in the game. And there is a subline I also wanted to show you after rook c8, so let's go back to that once more, because bishop b7 is also possible here, but then rook c7 and an exchange on a6 would leave Black with quite a good game also, you know. He has attacking chances over the a and the c file, material is equal. Yeah, he managed to get rid of his passive queen on a4 against White's beautiful queen. So I suppose these were all better options than what Van Wely played in the game, because after bishop g2 he gave up the exchange. And this is such a definite idea, you know. So he castled, but now Nepomniachtchi took the rook, of course. And, well, it's not that black is completely lost in this position, but, well, you know, you're an exchange down, and your queenside pawns are blocked, and where is your counterplay? And maybe you're just not completely lost or losing immediately, but in the long run, I suppose the extra rook will really count. Okay, so Nepomniachtchi now played g4. Queen c4 would also have been a very strong idea to try and penetrate on c7 and just harass all these black pieces. But g4 is also fine, I suppose. Queen c6, improving the position here. And now Nepomniachtchi is looking for some tactics here. He's improving his knight first, attacking the queen. Queen c7 followed. And now knight c4, building up some nasty pressure against d6. And I'm not sure, but probably Van Wely missed the tactical shot here that Nepomniachtchi was preparing here. The best move would probably be rook c8, and then after knight d6, which is also the tactical shot played in the game, this is less strong for white. Now queen d3, preparing to regain the piece, bishop e7, queen takes d7, queen takes c2, but after king a1, bishop f6, posting a very beautiful long diagonal and threatening to attack b2 with e5, e4, black has some good chances to hold the balance, I think. So let's go back to the game. After knight c4, where Van Wely could have played rook c8, immediately using his rook to put pressure, against c2 here. But he didn't play that. He played a5, and this move is too slow, or underestimating at least white's trick, because now Nepomniachtchi has an in-between sacrifice here. Knight takes d6, bishop d6, but queen d3 regains the piece, and notice that rook a6 protecting the bishop is not possible, of course. So, yeah, now black is really lost, and it went faster than it should have, I think, you know. So Van Wely tried to make the best of it. Here knight f6, queen takes d6, queen takes d6, rook takes d6, and at least he gets to take his pawn on g4 here. But I was watching this game yesterday on playchess.com, and the moves were coming in very quickly after knight takes d6 and so on, and Nepomniachtchi now also very quickly played rook g1. And I wondered, you know, isn't he making his task more difficult with this move? I was first looking at the preservation of his own h-pawn, because why would you give up all your pawns? You're up the exchange, but, you know, it doesn't mean you have to give up all the pawns. So, for instance, h3 came to mind, knight e3. And then after f6, knight c4, knight c6, for instance, and a check, something like this, f takes g7. I suppose that white's task could have been a bit easier, or, and which is probably even stronger than h3, rook e1, because then if you give up the h-pawn on h2, at least you immediately get back black's e-pawn, and now both rooks, they are a very serious force here in the center. h5, king c1, knight g4, rook e7, something like that, and I think white has a significant advantage here, and probably an easier technical task. Anyway, back to the game where rook g1 was played. So Van Wely took the a-pawn, the h-pawn. f6, g6 followed, rook g2. But now it takes a bit more time for white to get to black's e-pawn. He will conquer this pawn in the end, but black has used the time to make a few more consolidating moves. Now rook e3 follows, and this wins the e-pawn, of course, because it attacks both knight and pawn. So e4, I suppose Van Wely thought this is the best way to give up the pawn. Rook e4. And now Van Wely makes another mistake, and this is probably the last mistake in the game. I think he had the best chances to disturb white's rooks and to set up some kind of tenacious defense after the somewhat slow rook g1. Sorry, I will pause the video. Sorry guys for that small interruption. Yes, I was discussing the fact that black has more chances to disturb the rook with knight g5 here, for instance. Rook e5, knight e6, and a better chance to put up a tenacious defense. But like I said, after rook e4, I think Van Wely makes his last mistake, and this is really the decisive one. He plays g5. This looks very logical, and he wants, of course, to try and use the time that has been given to him by rook g1 to quickly push his free connected kingside pawns. And don't they look impressive? But now, unfortunately, there is a tactic here, and it begins with rook d3. This attacks the knight, and the knight can no longer go back to g5. So g4 was now played, but now comes the beautiful point, rook d5. And now white is attacking the h-pawn, and white's game will now move like clockwork, and black will lose more pawns now. So watch this, this is really nice. Rook a6, and now not rook takes h5 immediately, because knight d2 will win a rook and simply win for black. But first, the cautious rook f4 by Nepomniachtchi, and then again the threat is to take on h5. So Van Wely sets up a mating threat on the back rank, but that is easily parried by a4. And now Van Wely is still in time to protect his h-pawn with rook e1 check, and king a1, rook h1. Notice that after a5, rook e5 would be to no avail because of an exchange here, and after rook f5, white would win. So back to the game, where after the check, king a2 and rook h1, indeed black's h-pawn is protected, but now white wins the a-pawn here. Black now tries to improve his king position. Rook d5 was played, very nice move, freeing the way for the a-pawn and also keeping an eye on black's knight. King g6 protecting both pawns, which means that now black's rook has a free hand to play again. But after a5, rook e1, you can see Van Wely running but coming too late. a6, rook e8, a7, rook a8, and rook a5. White is now behind the pawn, so he now has the classical setup. And after knight h2, preparing to push the h-pawn, and rook b4, g3, rook b8, everything fits very nicely now. Now black has to give up his pawn, his rook against the pawn, of course, rook takes h7. And first, rook g8 check, very precise. King takes f6, now white wins the rook. Knight g4, this is blocking the g file, so prepares to push the g pawn. But after rook a3, everything is fine, and white will stop the black pawns. So in this position, Van Wely resigned. Very nice effort by Ian Nepomniachtchi. And yeah, I wonder if maybe short castles would have been an alternative to b5, b4. And also I wonder if Van Wely really had to sacrifice the exchange there on a8, because it is so definite. And in the rest of the game, he was really behind the facts, as we say. So, I hope you've enjoyed this analysis, learned something from it maybe. Looking forward to receive your comments. And please, until next time, bye bye.